Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Belinsky. I'm the president of the Slovak American Society, and we'd like to welcome you to our presentation today about Slovak and Czech Christmas traditions. It's great to see a large virtual audience joining us today. And just to let you know that our presentation today will be recorded, so it will be available for viewing afterwards, and you can share that link with your friends once we have it up on our YouTube channel. So I'd like to kindly request everyone to keep their microphones muted during the presentation, and during the presentation, feel free to use the chat function to ask questions of our presenters. And after their presentation, we'll open up the floor for questions. So before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to tell you about a few upcoming activities our society is offering. We'll be holding genealogy and conversation groups very shortly. So our genealogy group will start. Well, actually, both groups will start in January. So, and we've received some pretty substantial interest in both of these groups. So they look to be very promising events, or activities. And also, too, I would like to remind our current members to renew their memberships for 2021. And I want to encourage those who are attending our events for the first time to consider becoming a member. So please visit us at dcslovaks.org for more information. So today we have two speakers joining us from Global Slovakia, Gabriela and Zuzana. And I'm sure many of you have been enjoying their virtual presentations on Slovak culture and history. Both have spent a lot of time living, working, and studying abroad, which allows them to present Slovakia's complex heritage and history in a fresh and accessible way. So thank you, Gabrielle and Zuzana, for joining us today to talk about Slovak and Czech Christmas traditions. So go ahead and please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a pleasure, everyone, to connect with this new community. Indeed, I'm sure that many of you have had some contact with Global Slovakia already, most likely through our Facebook page and our webinars. Many of them are free, or our books. We have authored or co-authored 3 books together, published under Global Slovakia, and 2 of them are actually now available on Amazon. But before we get started with the presentation that Dr. Gabriela will lead for us, I just want to use this space and opportunity to introduce Global Slovakia and what is it that we do. So our mission is to share Slovakia with the world. As our host graciously said, we spent many years abroad. In fact, I'm the founder of Global Slovakia, so I was born in communist Czechoslovakia, and about 1 year before the revolution, my parents defected. We went through the various refugee camps in Austria before we came as landed immigrants to Canada. So I grew up in Canada and the US. I also studied in the United States before I went on to do my PhD in the United Kingdom, where I had the pleasure to meet Dr. Gabriela. And being a Slovak that grew up abroad, I always felt that there wasn't enough information about Slovakia in English, and that when people from Slovakia, because of the language barrier and the cultural gap, did try to communicate Slovakia's story or history or her legacy to a foreign mindset or a foreign audience, it didn't necessarily translate well. And it had to do with, like I said, the language barrier, but also the cultural gap. So Gabriela and I, as Slovaks abroad, really saw an opportunity with our know-how of both societies and both cultures to basically try to bridge that and communicate Slovakia's story in a new way that's engaging and that's also appealing to Slovaks, expats abroad, and people of Slovak ancestry, but also people beyond Slovakia. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been really devoted to this mission with our mind, heart, and soul for the last 3 or 4 years, very actively. And we're really grateful and happy to see our community of followers growing and people really appreciating the content that we're putting out there. And this is the year, where we've tried something different. We've launched Global Slovakia Academy, where we have different courses exploring different aspects of Slovak history. And a very popular program we have now, which this webinar is actually based on, is exploring those Christmas traditions that we all have, that we all appreciate, we all look forward to during this time of year, but we actually don't know why we do them. And Dr. Gabriela is going to be taking us on this journey. She has a PhD actually in corruption. She was a scholar on a very prestigious scholarship, but before she went to the UK to study her master's and then later her doctorate, she actually did her fundamental education in Slovakia, which included a master's at the University of Nitra in cultural studies. So she also has a very in-depth knowledge of cultural practices in Slovakia, both on a personal level, having grown up in Slovakia, having an interest in these facets of society, but also academically. And I think you'll really enjoy this wonderful presentation that she put together for you. So Dr. Gabby, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone, and hello from me too. It's a pleasure to be with you. Today, we're getting closer to Christmas, so it's really special, and we really value these opportunities to share the cultural heritage of Central Europe with you at this time. Before I go into the presentation, Brian, can you please make me a presenter again, because I can no longer share my screen? Thank you. And as Zuzana said, today we will journey through the Advent and Christmas traditions of the heart of Europe. We'll focus on St. Lucy's Day, or Santa Lucia, which is today, and then we'll discuss the actual Christmas, what we do, why we do it, and also what we eat and how we celebrate. So, let me just pull up the presentation here, there. So let's dive right in. Let's discuss Advent and Christmas. So we're currently finding ourselves halfway through Advent. It's the third Advent Sunday. And this period is known to Christians, but it had its purpose even before the arrival of Christianity into Central Europe. So both for Christians and for the ancient predecessors of Czechs and Slovaks, this was a time to prepare, sort of spiritually, but also practically, for the arrival of a new year, of a new cycle. It's also the time of the year when we experience the longest nights and very short days. And just as they did centuries ago, we too today feel all these emotions that come with it when it gets dark outside. So we might get sad, maybe even depressed, melancholic. And this is why our ancestors set aside time for themselves to deal with it, to move through it, and to step into the new year kind of renewed and rebirth. And that is what Advent is still about in Czech Republic and Slovakia. In Slovakia, perhaps more so, because Slovakia is more Christian, whereas the Czech Republic is now more secular. So it's especially in Slovakia that we find these Advent traditions that are rooted in the ancient pagan heritage of our ancestors still alive. And since today is Santa Lucia's Day, let's just discuss that. It is a fascinating day. It presents the apex of what is called in the region witching days. Both Czechs and Slovaks have it, but again, Slovaks keep these customs alive to a great extent until today. And so as the name suggests, the day is tied to a saint, Saint Lucy, who is the patron of light, also patron of young women, the maidens. But it's the complexity of the holiday goes beyond the Christian heritage. So St. Lucy's Day is the escalation of the witching days that presents milestones during Advent, when our ancestors believed that dark powers were at play and that they were at their strongest during these days, because as I said, it is dark outside. So to them, in their imagination, in their belief, that translated into these dark forces having greater power over our lives at this time of the year. So they did what they could to protect themselves from it. What that meant, what it translated into, particularly on Santa Lucia's days, were these very iconic processions of girls clad in white, usually with their faces whitened with flour, carrying goose feathers, visiting houses, and performing a certain ritual that was designed to sweep all the negative energy, all the witches, all the illness, all the misfortune, anything negative that people did not want to have in their life. And they did not want to carry into Christmas and into the new year away with those goose feathers. So to kind of dive into the atmosphere, there is a short video that allows you to imagine what it was once like and what it is still like, especially in Slovakia, but in the Czech Republic too, where this tradition of Ludsky, or Santa Lucia's processions, are still alive. So this is a beautiful kind of spiritual and cultural artifact of the old days. But back in the day, it also fulfilled a very practical purpose too. In those days, girls and boys did not necessarily hang out together so much. So these processions were an opportunity for the girls who were dressed up as Lucias to go visit the houses of their romantic prospects and check them out. Have a look at the family, have a look if everything was ordered, and you know what they were in should they marry that man. On this day, people also believe that they could protect themselves aside from these processions, and to that purpose they would use garlic. They would add a lot of garlic into their food, but they would also make crosses with garlic on their front doors, on their wrists and on their foreheads. They would use a special chalk that was blessed on January the 6th, on the holiday of the Three Kings, to draw circles around their houses. They would also smudge in the stables to protect the animals using the smoke, which is an ancient technique that's known to all old cultures. On this day, men also started to make the so-called Lucia stool, which is a piece of wooden furniture, the production of which was governed by very special rules. They had to, from Santa Lucia until Christmas, every day they were only allowed to swing their axe once to cut the wood to produce this stool. Use of any metal particles, nails, and such like was strictly forbidden. And it was believed that if you sit on this stool on a Christmas Eve, on the crossroads, or behind the altar in churches, you will be able to see the witches in your neighborhood. So in this sense, the witches have negative connotations. They have a bad name. But to the pagan predecessors of Czechs and Slovaks, this was not something to be feared. They believed that the witches, or the dark time of the year, the dark forces were unsavory. They were uncomfortable, but they were part of life. So they designed a set of rituals that was supposed to help people move through it and deal with it. And these traditions that revolve around witching days and the escalate on Santa Lucia, they were an important part of it that were absorbed into Christianity when it was introduced into the region in the 9th century. But Santa Lucia is not all about witches. It's also a very potent day to engage in love magic. And it was especially girls who performed these very private, intimate ceremonies in the circle of their closest friends that were supposed to allow them to peek into the future, who they would marry. So maybe you're familiar with the custom of writing 12 names of boys that a girl likes on 12 pieces of paper, and then pulling one piece of that one paper out of the bunch every day, not looking at the name. And then the last paper with the last name on it, that man would become their husband in the year to come, hopefully. And you can see in this Santa Lucia, they kind of a tension, a contradiction. So we have the witches that are negative, but at the same time, it's a holiday of love that's filled with magic. And this friction in itself talks to us of that past, of the point at which the native pagan faith and the Christian belief sort of merged. They did not really reconcile themselves perfectly, but they were combined into something very unique. So some experts say that Santa Lucia is the Christian kind of equivalent of the old Slavic pagan goddess Jiva, who was the goddess of the earth, the patroness of girls and of women, and the patroness of love as well. So that's where we see this, like, both positive and negative thrown into the same bag on this very special day. And as I said, it's it's a day for women. Also, their behavior and their conduct is governed by a set of rules and bans. Women should not be wandering about on this day. They should not be visiting any houses, and they should refrain from certain kinds of work, such as spinning the wool. Instead, they should be home, and they should dedicate themselves to other tasks that were deemed appropriate and that wouldn't bring misfortune to the house and to the family and to the community, because women were believed to have sort of special powers on this day. Now, moving on, let's talk about winter solstice, which happens on the 21st of December, and that is the predecessor of Christmas. So before Christianity was introduced to Czechs and Slovaks, people in this region gathered on the 21st of December to celebrate their winter solstice, which was all about worshipping the sun. Because on a winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, the longest night. So to pagans, this was a day that was conspicuous for all kinds of magic and forces to enter their lives. It was believed that on this day, the souls of the departed would enter into the world of the living and either help or cause havoc in it. So a lot of the ceremonies revolved around sort of honoring the ancestors, offering them a drop of meat or a honey cake, and remembering them in the best possible terms so that their souls would rest at peace and would not cause any problems to them. And this is something that was maintained in the centuries after, and it's around winter. Slovaks and Czechs still visit cemeteries to pay respects to their loved ones who had left them. On this day, people would gather. It was one of the biggest holidays in the region. So a lot of people would come together, fires would be lit, offerings would be brought in the form of either occasionally sacrificial animals, but mostly things like breads, cakes, honey, ginger cookies, meat. People would also exchange little gifts as their tokens of appreciation and love, which was again later on continued when Christianity came. The holiday and the festivities were given a new meaning and a new purpose. So when Christianity came in the 9th century, winter solstice became Christmas. It was moved from 21st to the 24th, 25th, and the 26th. The winter solstice celebrations were also accompanied by a lot of dancing and singing, because these people believed that the noise and scary masks that they used to wear would again repel any nasty spirits, ghosts, and witches. This tradition too was maintained, but it comes on later after Christmas in both Czech Republic and Slovakia. So this is the carnival season, it's the time of balls and merriment and festivities. In the Czech Republic, it's called Masopust, and in Slovakia, it's called Fasiangi. Whether we're talking about the Christian traditions that we're going to dive into in a moment, or the pagan ways, this time of the year, Christmas, is all about new beginnings. To pagans, this is the time when the sun is born again as a baby. The days from December the 21st are getting longer again, so the baby is growing, and it needs to be supported with positive thoughts and a good, honest conduct of the people, which is why it's very important to Czechs and Slovaks until today to watch what they're thinking, how they're behaving, because this is the time when we step into the new year, and what you step into the new year with, that will stay with you for the next 12 months. Which is why it's important to also wish your neighbors, your family, your colleagues all the best, because what goes around comes around, and you'll be protected and looked after and hopefully happy for the next 12 months to come. So we're arriving at the big day in Central Europe, and that's Christmas Eve, so December the 24th, which is filled with many customs and traditions that speak to us of the past. Again, it's fair to say that overall, these customs, so these are the traditions and the foods that people used to do before the fried carp and the potato salad arrived on their plates. So these are, again, more alive, more discussed and more known about in Slovakia, because the Czech Republic is more secular. But Czech Republic too has its areas that are famous for their curious Christmas traditions and foods. And that is, for instance, Wallachia in northern Moravia. So on a Christmas Eve was a long day, especially for women, who would get up usually on midnight, or also between midnight and 2 a.m., so as to make sure that they had enough time to cook and bake everything. All the foods for not just the 24th, but also the 25th, and preferably the 26th, were supposed to be ready before the sunrise. As this period of the 3 days was not to be dedicated to work, it was to be spent in contemplation and in sharing time with your closest family, which is why all the work should be done and dusted before the day actually starts. So women were busy bees since midnight. Then in the morning, it was the job of a man to bring in enough wood and enough water for the family to last throughout the holidays. So again, they wouldn't have to engage in those heavy tasks at this special time of the year. Girls and daughters and women would make sure that their house is spotless and clean. All the work equipment would be removed to the attic. It was not to be kept in the ritual space of the home that was to host the Christmas Eve ceremonies. There was a ban on sweeping in the houses on this day because there was that belief that this is the time when the people who you loved and who died could come visit you as spirits or ghosts. So you would not want to accidentally sweep anyone out and upset them. So no sweeping, and instead of sweeping, you would put usually beans, lentils, pulses of any kind in the corners as a token of food for these souls. So that was an act of generosity, and also an act of respect and a display of your honor towards your ancestors. There were no Christmas trees as we know them today until fairly recently. So the tradition of a Christmas tree spread into the countryside from the cities, and the trees became especially popular after the communist coup of 1948. Before that, people would either make Christmas tree-like thing from hay, and they would hang it above their Christmas dinner table, or they would use the tip of a coniferous tree to the same purpose, and they would decorate it with ribbons or gingerbreads. Hay was there because the hay, both in Christianity and in the native faith, was considered to be a material that held special properties that would protect the family and the house. For Christians, it was also very symbolic because Jesus was born in the stables on the hay. So that's why hay played such an important role on Christmas Eve. And that's also why these hay Christmas trees were never just thrown away and discarded after Christmas. It would be kept and added to grains that would be sown into soil in the following year to assure a good harvest. People would also decorate their dwellings with branches of coniferous trees that they would bring home. This again is a custom that was brought over from the pagan times. The pagans used to believe that the trees were sacred. They were holy objects that also acted as shrines or as temples. So bringing in a little bit of a tree was again deemed to have strong protective powers to keep the family safe during the dark time of the year. And now we're arriving at Christmas Eve feast. So Christmas Eve has various names. In Slovakia, it's called Kolyada or Koleda in the Czech lands, which speaks to us of the pagan times. There are regions in which it's called Vigilia, which means the eve of a feast. So it's the eve of the birth of Jesus Christ. Or it was also called Dohviezdny Večer because only once the first star appeared on the sky, only then you can sit at the dinner table and start feasting. At the dinner table became an altar or a shrine on the day. A lot of attention was dedicated to laying it and to properly preparing it for dinner. In both Czech Republic and Slovakia, we find regions where people would tie chain around the legs of the tree, and the family members would put their feet on it during the dinner, which was to make sure that the family would stay together for the next 12 months. There would be either scales of a carp placed underneath the white linen cloth, or this could be lentils, pulses, as well as hay. This was to call in prosperity and abundance in the year to come, and also to protect. Once families sat down to share the Christmas dinner, nobody was supposed to leave the table until the dinner was over. Doing that meant risking that you would die in the next year. So all the meals were brought in at once, and the family engaged in this dinner ritual together as one. The Christmas Eve dinner, before the fried carp and potato salad came in, looked very different, and it also held a very deep meaning and symbolism in Czech Republic and Slovakia. On the Christmas dinner table, you were supposed to have a little bit of everything that you harvested that year, because that would mean that you would, again, in the next year, have an abundant or even more abundant harvest than you did the previous year. It was also a way of showing and feeling and sharing gratitude for the gifts of nature and for benevolent weather and fertile soil. So it was very important to make note of that and to find a way to incorporate this everything into a Christmas dinner, which consisted of several dishes. It could be 3, 7, or 9. These numbers were not haphazard. They had a meaning. So 3 in the region is taken to refer to it's the Holy Trinity, and it's kind of completion and perfection. 7 is the number of wisdom, and households there would be 12 dishes that symbolize the cycle of the year. There are 12 months in a year. There are 12 apostles in the Christian script. So again, this is the sign of completion, and it's interesting that even the flag of the European Union has 12 stars on it, because that's what it's supposed to communicate. It's the completion, it's the perfection, and it's the unity. So what would you serve on the Christmas dinner? In the Catholic households, there was to be strictly no meat, because Christmas Eve is the last day of the 30-day Advent fast. This is not the case in Protestant households, and Protestantism being particularly strong in the Czech Republic, so we find differences in the traditions there. But for Catholics, this would mean, and for actually the majority of the population, because most people lived in rural areas, they were relatively poor, they lived off the land, so they could not really afford to have big meat feasts on this day, which was reflected in their Christmas menu that consisted, first of all, of the waffles that you'll be probably familiar with and that you can see in the picture. Those were usually baked by a local teacher in the days before Christmas and then distributed to all families. These were served with honey and sometimes garlic, because honey is the symbol of love, sweetness, togetherness, and understanding. We find regions in which either the lady of the house or the father of the family would make crosses on everyone's forehead using the honey as a protection. The waffles were introduced by the church because they symbolize the body of Christ. So this is the Eucharist that people had at home. It was not just a waffle, it was considered to be a holy sacred bread. And the breadcrumbs or anything left over from the dinner was not to be again discarded. That was sacrilegious. The crumbs would either be put aside, and because they were thought to have healing properties, so they would be added to potions or to smudging blends. if that was needed, or they were given to farm animals to share the abundance and also to make sure that they are protected in the next 12 months. There would be a cutting of an apple, where you cut the apple in the middle, and if you have the perfect star inside, that means that you will be healthy in the year to come. People would also crack a nut. Again, if the nut was healthy, that meant good fortune and health in the forthcoming year. This is a tradition that is still kept by Czechs and Slovaks, and this is usually how the Christmas Eve dinner starts. Afterwards come in soups and different kinds of porridges, and this is where pulses, so beans, lentils, etc., play prime, because people consider them a symbol of abundance and prosperity. So to have that on your Christmas dinner table would mean that prosperity and wealth would come to you in the next year. Another important staple was bread and ceremonial cakes. So bread anyways is an icon of Czech and Slovak cuisines. It plays an important part in our culture, in our psyche, in our rituals. So we still welcome people into the country with bread and salt. So of course, bread had to be present on a Christmas Eve dinner table, either in the form of cakes. You can see two examples here. The one on the left is the Czech frgal, which comes from northern Moravia. And on the right, you can see a kračun from eastern Slovakia. Again, they were not just cakes. They were considered to be very special. They were ceremonially prepared just for this occasion, using special ingredients or either multiple fillings or grains, plants that were deemed powerful and sacred. Incantations or prayers were recited during the process, because these cakes were thought to have the power to protect the family. And if there was a cake or this kind of ceremonial cake on the table on the day, that would mean that there would be bread on the table every day in the next 12 months. And because these people were relatively poor, they lived through some harsh centuries when they faced funny weather patterns, pandemics, wars. To have bread on the table was the biggest gift that you can possibly receive in life. That meant that life was good, you are safe, there was plenty of food around for everyone. So bread was synonymous with survival and thriving in this culture. We also have different kinds of breads. You will probably know bobalky from Slovakia. It can have different names in different regions. The preparation of these little bread pieces served with poppy seeds and honey is also symbolic. So the first piece that was cut from this bobalky dough was wrapped into fruit trees to make sure that they bear plentiful harvest in the following growing season. Also, everyone in the family ate from this dish from the same bowl, and everybody was supposed to have at least everything to, again, keep the family together. In some regions of Czech Republic and Slovakia, you are supposed to eat everything that was on the dinner table, so you shouldn't really leave any leftovers. But in other regions, it was only okay to have 3 mouthfuls of each dish. So there was not to be any overeating or greediness on the day. And I will close it off and open it up for questions. But before that, I will just quickly look at the Christmas carp and potato salad. So where did this come from? It's popular, it's an icon, it's the food of Christmas Eve today, but it was not the case until after the Second World War, especially in rural areas in Slovakia. So the trend started in towns and cities. The carp was popular because it was the most accessible of fish. Fish is a meal or food that you can have during a period of fast, such as mandated by the church. So that's why people started consuming fish in larger amounts in those times when they were supposed to be fasting. And later on, as time went by, of communism to power, because as you know, during socialism, Czechoslovakia had a planned economy, so production of everything had to be planned, including production of all foods. And simply it was easier to plan for the nation of 15 million if everybody ate the same. So carp was hugely popularized and was promoted, and it became what it is today. So it's the meal or the dish without which we cannot really imagine having Christmas, and that is present on Czech and Slovak Christmas dinner tables. The fried fish, even before carp came in as a trend, people ate dish in more affluent regions and more affluent households, but they wouldn't fry it. So this fried delicacy kind of came in after the First World War, when a lot of Czech teachers and clerks were coming into Slovakia to fill the gap after the departing Hungarians. And with them came their foods, their traditions, and their customs, and among them was the Christmas carp. So this is where I would like to pause and open it up for questions, if you have any.
Gabby, actually, can I just jump on? We do have a question here from Harvey's, and he's asking you, one second, pull it up. So now we'll be transported to the present, to 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And he is asking, what are some popular elements of the Slovak Christmas tree in 2020? What are the trends in Slovakia right now?
So the trend is still we have the chocolate decorations that came in again after the Second World War, became popular because chocolate became more accessible for people. So these are popular year on year, and the companies come with different versions and colors and shapes of these decorations. But what we are also seeing more of in the last decade or so is the survival or the resurrection of decorations that have something to do with the past, so that are rooted in the old legacy. And whether these are the decorations made from straw, you can see them made into beautiful things these days, and sold widely in shops. So people are liking that more, the kind of natural take on Christmas and Christmas decorations.
If I could interrupt you, I believe your camera is turned off.
It is. Is it on now?
You're back.
Wait.
Yeah. Oh, it's turned off again.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
A question?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Artko?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
In our Lutheran Slovak household on Christmas Eve, we started with oplatky with honey, and our soup was kapusnica. which is sauerkraut, sausage, mushroom, and prunes. But then we finished with opekanse, which was poppy seed and little loaves of bread. Can you explain to me why poppy seed is so popular and what was the significance of opekanse?
Yes, of course. So opekanse is the other name for bobalki that we mentioned, or they're also called pupaki. And poppy seeds were important because, again, they have these tiny grains. So people associated them with prosperity, but also protection. So we find several traditions or customs in the Slovak and Czech folklore that are to do with how to protect yourself against ghosts and vampires and witches and such like. And they usually involve kind of throwing handful of poppy seeds at the spirit or at the ghost, because it's said they cannot pursue you until they pick it all off. It's also for that reason that poppy seeds were put into coffins with people who were suspected of being vampires or not dying and resurrecting themselves after the funeral. So again, that the tiny seeds should keep them busy. So they had this function sort of on the spiritual and folkloristic level of protection and prosperity. But the poppy seeds are hugely important in Czech and Slovak cuisines. They're so important that those two countries have an exception from the European Union. In other countries, normally forbidden to grow poppy seeds because that's what you get opium from. But in those two countries, it's allowed because it plays such an important part of our culture. And it's also the effect that the poppy seeds have on humans, especially during this difficult and cold and dark time of the year. They are very calming and soothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
For example, for poppy seeds, there was another practice of mothers rubbing poppy seeds, ground poppy seeds into the gums of their babies to calm them down. So the Czech and Slovak cultures intuitively use these seeds as tools for light euphoric states, or we can say calming states.
And there are also, poppy seeds are very rich in calcium, even more so than milk. And, not everybody had a cow, could afford to have a cow or buy milk regularly. So they would supplement that with poppy seeds to strengthen their bone structure and to improve their, health. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Just something that has been recurring in the comments. So we've been referring to the thin wafers as waffles, but yeah, indeed, another way of saying it is wafers, and they're similar to the wafers that you get in church when you, I forgot what the term is, when you walk up to the priest to receive the blood and body of Christ. And yeah, they're made in a similar way to waffles, but obviously they're much thinner crust, and they can actually be both sweet and savory. But usually on the Christmas Eve table, you have them with walnuts and honey, and that's the way you ceremonially eat them at the beginning of the meal. That's actually what consuming the wafers with honey and walnuts, or the crushed walnuts, is the opening of the ceremonial dinner. We have one more question here, Gabby, for you, and that is. Okay. So this is again from Parviz, and it's what is the myth tradition of Krampus? Is that something that is a big part of the Slovak holiday tradition modernly? So we're talking the Čert. So Krampus is actually the term that's utilized in the Germanic-speaking world. We in Slovakia have a different reference for it. It's Čert, the Aniel, and could you tell us more about that?
So we do find those in the customs on St. Nicholas Day on December the 6th, when St. Nicholas visits children of a community, and he's accompanied by an angel and a devil, or a Čert, or a Krampus. So in the Christian spirituality, that means sort of, yes, the balance of the light, the good and the bad. the divine and the evil, and it fulfills an educational purpose, so as to teach children to be good and virtuous, because if they are, they're rewarded by given sweets or little snacks by an angel, but if they have been naughty in the last year, they would be given a piece of coal, and they will be chased around by the chert or the devil. But the roots of the character are deeper. Again, they run into the pagan fabric of Central Europe, where the Krampus or the chert, they are the continuation of the horned dog Veles, god Veles, who was the god of the underworld, but also a patron of animals and of forests. And it was especially in winter, and as the time gets closer to the winter solstice, that people would engage in all kinds of rituals that were devoted to this deity. So when Christianity came, that figure got this connotations of pure evil, but in the past it wasn't the case. It symbolized death and transition more than evil. And we do find that mask then appearing again after Christmas, so the carnival period or Shrovetide in both Czech Republic and Slovakia.
And just to add a little bit of commentary on that, as a child growing up, I had experienced my very young youth in Czechoslovakia, the notion of Saint Nicholas Day or Saint Nicholas coming with the Aniel and the chert, so the angel and the devil, certainly helped to develop the conscience of children, because I remember being very, very scared and really reviewing my behavior over the year, whether I would get coal or I would get a sweet from the Aniel. So it's a great way of, I guess, in developing a moral code or a conscience for children to reflect on their behavior, because we were deathly afraid of the devil, because he does come in a particularly grotesque mask. At least the Central European tradition of this, it's not cutesy. It's very, very scary.
No, and I can attest to that. And it's children until today are scared of the chert, who comes in with a blackened face, and it's all loud and rattles chains. So yeah, it sends children to tears still.
I just see one question here from Michael, and it said in his family, they would have 3 soups for Christmas on Christmas Eve. Very abundant selection of liquid intake, so mushroom soup, kapusnica, and also prune soup. Can you tell us a little bit about families consuming multiple soups on the day?
So it was really, there was no strict code as to what the 7, 9, or 12 or 3 dishes should be. It was just set sort of what they should contain. So whereas in some families, it would be several soups, for instance, as in yours, in other families, the dish would take a form of a porridge, or this thick kasha that we have in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and that was actually considered sacred food by the Slavs. For a reason, these soups, but also the porridges, they are easy to make. They can be sourced from plants and ingredients that grow even in harsh environments. And both Czech Republic and Slovakia do experience long, cold winters. So these were the foods that kept our ancestors and our culture alive for centuries. And the soups themselves, they're in different regions, the soup would be different. In Czech Republic and Western Slovakia, it was often fish soup that used up the scrappings of the fish that was prepared as the main dish. As you said, kapusnica, especially in the east and in the north, that have the harshest weather conditions. So sauerkraut is one of the few things Cabbage is one of the few things that grows, and the way to preserve it through winter is to ferment it. There would be different processes, so there would be lentil soups, bean soups. We also find different kinds of sour soups in Central and Eastern Slovakia. So it's a very rich repertoire, and each family kind of like chose their thing and adapted it to their needs and to the flavors of their family. We also have some unique records of mixed families of Catholic and Protestant that would bring in kind of the dishes of the both confessions together. And this is where sausages in the cabbage soup would appear, because if you are a Catholic, you are not really supposed to have any meat in your Christmas soup or otherwise. The time for that came on the 25th and 26th.
But in general, kapusnica, or the cabbage soup, is the most popular dish, or the most iconic dish served on Christmas in both Czech Republic and Slovakia. And often that includes also those hand-picked mushrooms that families collect during the early autumn period, as well as prunes or plums even. And these are plums that have been either preserved or they're kept in storage units, usually underground, under the garage in many Slovak households. So yes, so you have a combination where all the elements are mixed in one, but definitely kapusnica is a must on every family's dining table on the 24th.
Especially in Slovakia, it's less so in the Czech Republic. They tend to go more for their fish soup or lentil soup in Moravia.
So we have more questions here about hay. So some families putting hay either underneath the dining table or underneath the tablecloth. Could you explain about that?
Yes, so they do that. There is also, in the past, there used to be a bunch of hay in the corner of the room in which Christmas dinner was served. It was a very important sort of component of pagan rituals, but and that kind of later on got absorbed into Christianity, as I mentioned, because Jesus Christ was born in a stable on the hay. Bringing in the hay into the house was commemorating the event. It was welcoming the child, the light, and the new beginning into the world. In addition to believing that the hay, slama, had protective properties. So we do find it present in different ways in rituals that mark the witching days or strigie dni for that reason.
Let's see if there's any more questions. So what's a practical way to source Slovak holiday decorations if they're available in the US? So as Gabriela was saying, there's now a trend to return a little bit back to our origins and back to what is natural in Slovakia. Certainly in the 90s, there was this big boom in importing the American traditions and Santa Claus and shiny things on the tree, big plastic bulbs and such. But now you'll see many families going back to what was practiced maybe just a generation ago, and a lot of this has to do with, as Gabby said, hanging those chocolates, which are then eaten by the children. So there's a multifunctionality to that decor, but also these decorations made from hay. They're very cheap. They're easily sourced anywhere. I actually bought mine this year from Bila. And you buy a little package, and there's an abundance of them, and you can basically with one package decorate a whole tree. And I'm sure if you look on Amazon, you'll be able to find these straw Christmas decorations that many of them go back actually to the old Slavic faith. So you'll have a lot of circular decorations that represent the sun, and that represents the return of the sun that was celebrated by our pagan ancestors on the 21st of December.
And also, other than hay decorations, there people, my grandma still hangs apples on the Christmas tree, nuts, just walnuts, whether plain or decorated, pine cones. So that if you want to get creative and have a little bit of fun before Christmas, it's actually really easy to make those decorations yourself. Decorated gingerbread cookies, pierniczki is another option of beautifying your Christmas tree in a natural way.
Gabby, actually, could you tell us a little bit about the course? Because in the course that we have, Czech and Slovak Christmas, which I'm going to just write the link for, we explore or we actually guide people how to create some of these traditional decors, like the walnut or the apple.
Yeah, so in the course, it kind of brings together the customs and traditions. It guides you through them as we go through Advent and Christmas. So they are easy to recreate in your home. There are also 17 or more recipes of the new dishes, but also the old ancient ones with short descriptions and histories. Again, it's easy for you to do it at home. And we do have tips how to make your own Christmas decorations using the materials that are widely accessible, that were used by our ancestors until recently, really. It was not that long ago that the shiny baubles arrived in the Czech Republic and Slovakia and became accessible to the masses. That's really just a matter of the second half of the 20th century. Prior to that, people would decorate their Christmas trees and homes with the decorations that they made themselves. In the Christmas course, you'll also find that it's a 3-hour-long playlist of carols, some classics, some from the different regions of Czech Republic and Slovakia, as well as tips to make your own Christmas presents to your loved ones.
We have a question here, actually. It's from Suzanne. I don't know if you can jump on a video to explain it better. You were asking, are these traditions or these Christmas traditions that Gabriela was talking about community events, or are they mostly family-oriented celebrations?
Okay, so it depends. The celebrations around witching days, so this is the Advent, they usually so during Advent is the period of fasting, which also meant that there were not to be any huge gatherings, like dances, balls, zábavy, as we call them in Slovak. So any kind of gatherings that took place were smaller and more intimate. So, for instance, on Santa Lucia's day, it would be the girls gathering together. On Santa Barbara's and on St. Andrew's, again, it would be often women of different generations coming together. But this would be close friends, neighbors, family. And this is something that holds true to most of the Advent period. Protestant traditions are more flexible in this because they do observe different rites. So Protestants would organize pig killings, just as Catholics would do on the 21st of December. But in Protestant families, this would kind of be a big gathering and sharing of the food with neighbors, whereas in Catholic families, it would be, again, more family orientated and smaller in scale. Christmas, so Christmas Eve, Christmas Day are supposed to be spent with your family only. So on Christmas Day, people should not really be walking around and visiting each other. They should be together as a family. The only people you do or would find walking around were the carolers. And then it kind of opens up. On the 26th, that's the first day when the festivities are resumed. So balls, hunts, different kind of festivities that would take place in villages, and they always involved dancing and music, and that would then like smoothly kind of roll into New Year's Eve, and then after New Year's into Fasciangi. But that period of 30 days and the beginning of Christmas, that's really should be the time for introspection. So it's smaller in scale. But even today, we do find these traditions kept by communities. It's often children and schools that revive them. So on Santa Lucia's Day, on St. Nicholas Day, that takes place not this year, but other years in Czech Republic and Slovakia, concerts where children come and sing songs, recite. There's a little cultural program. So in the 21st century, it takes on this expression too.
But it's also very interesting how on the 24th it's almost sacrilegious to have anyone but blood family over, or the actual partners of blood family. It's a very, very closed day. And then on the following day, on the 25th, that's when you start making the visits also to the extended family, perhaps some close friends and neighbors. And then on the December 26th, that's when everyone really goes wild, and that's actually a big party day in Slovakia, because people are just maybe frustrated from having to spend so many isolated days with their immediate relatives, that they use the 26th to kind of let off some steam. So there is a reward after following this ritual of just being in this close-knit group.
And that's when the kind of iconic event of the day are the Svetoštěfanské polovačky and Svetoštěfanské zábavy. So this is St. Stephen's feast day in Slovakia, and it's the day for the hunts that kind of have their own special culture and rituals around them. And it's also the day for dances in villages when the youth gathers and finally has fun after the 30 days of silence and feasting and no meat, no drinking.
So there's a question, for example, from Suzanne here, and she's asking, would it be appropriate to ask my distant relatives to celebrate Christmas with them, or wait another time?
I think it's very individual. From my experience, well, my family and the entire family, like, we're always happy to host, because it's the time to share and to show generosity. And in fact, although we're talking about it's not appropriate to, wander around on these days, on a Christmas Eve dinner table, there will always be or should be, in the past there was, a spare plate laid for random travelers or passers-by, in the spirit of Christmas generosity. So I think if you feel like you want to do it, just go for it. Also today, it's a lot more flexible, it's a lot more open. People adjust these traditions to suit their own lifestyles and their own ways.
And I'm sure you would be actually considered a very a VIP guest coming all the way over from America to experience, a traditional Slovak Christmas. So you would be very much appreciated and maybe even celebrated and revered on the dinner table on the 24th.
Because it's one thing that we can say about Slovaks. We do love when we see people having interest in our culture, in our traditions. Like, that's always met with a lot of enthusiasm and will to share.
Here's a comment from Anne and John, and they mentioned that the extra plate on the table was for an unexpected guest, maybe a baby Jesus. And indeed, that is a popular tradition, especially in Eastern Slovakia, is to leave an empty plate for that special guest, which would be Jesus, as well as for late family members. So those that have passed away that would be coming through on the house, so they too could join in on the festivities.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah, here's a comment. Don't forget Slivovica. What can you tell
Oh,
us
no,
about
no, no. Don't forget that.
why is it so culturally important on this day?
So Slivovica, you're not supposed to get drunk throughout Advent, but Slivovica had its place during Christmas dinner as aperitif or as digestive, because, well, for most of these people, distilling the fruit into spirits was the only way to preserve them through winter. They had no fridges, they had no freezers, so they had to do something with it and usually translate it into spirits. So that's one way of having a piece of your last year's harvest on the Christmas table. Not to mention that our babkas and detkos and great grandmothers before that would swear to the medicinal properties of having just a little bit of Slivovica. It will keep you healthy for 150 years if you do it properly. And in Central Slovakia, actually, there is a special drink made with Slivovica that's served on Christmas, and that's called hriatvo. And it's Slivovica, to which is added caramelized bacon. So you put bacon on a pan with a little bit of sugar, you cook it, you fry it until it's crispy, so no fat is left, and you put this crispy bits into your Slivovica. Sometimes with a little bit of honey to add flavor. And yeah, actually it sounds funny, but we tried it last year and it was kind of nice. It's a different flavor, but it was definitely very warming, which is another thing that you want on the cold winter nights. So yes, go for Slivovica, and don't forget to drop on the floor or on the ground, because that was the drop offered to the ancestors in an act of reverence.
Gabby, can you actually mention what is the name of the caramelized bacon Slivovica concoction again?
It's called hriatvo. I can type it. Let me type it into the chat if I can. Yes. Okay.
And we have another question from Susan about the role of the consumption of spirits or alcohol on this day, or why has alcohol played such an important role in Slovak culture also on the 24th? And does it have to do also with famine? Does consuming alcohol warm your stomach and make you feel less hungry?
Well, they say so, and not just in Slovakia, but yes, it's not just famine, but lots of hardships that these people had to face, and many coped with it with an excessive consumption of alcohol. It's a sad fact that we kind of just dismiss or look away from. So yes, that's one of the challenges that Slovaks faced, and it's actually what Ludovic Tur, when he was trying to awaken the nation, so he considered alcoholism to be, I think, the thing that is holding Slovaks back. So these enlightened individuals were doing what they could to steer people away from drinking too much. But when consumed in moderation, it is it's natural. It's homemade. Often there would be herbs added to the mix, and it does have certain properties such as antiseptic. It fights kind of, if you have viruses or infections or any nasties inside, that the little bit of that can help you deal with it. My grandpa always sent me on my travels with a little bit of Slivovica, telling me to have just a little shot in the morning and in the evening. And I have to say, I ate all kinds of foods in the street everywhere, and I never had a problem. whereas others who did not practice this prevention did. So I do believe there is something to it. And it is, as I said, it is warming. And it's cold in Slovakia now. Back in the day, the houses would not be insulated. They wouldn't have central heating. So it was a way of keeping people warm and cheering them up.
I just want to interrupt very quickly to just share some good news with everyone. One of our first books that we wrote, Gabrielle and I co-authored, is what we refer to as the first national narrative of Slovakia. It was called Slovakia, the Legend of the Linden. It's a 200-page book that's a very visual journey. Each page has either a different illustration or photograph, very little text that takes you through the Slovak epic from 500 years before the birth of Christ to present day. And we tell the story not just through the signposts of history, but also through emotion and symbolism. And we sold out of this book, but recently, or actually today or yesterday, I see that now it's up on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes & Noble. I will provide links in the chat. And we've had very, very good feedback on it. We've slightly modified it. It's the second edition, so now it's called The Legend of the Linden, A History of Slovakia. If you're hesitating to purchase it, look at the original title, Slovakia, The Legend of the Linden. Well, you'll see like an array of positive feedback about the book from different people from all over the world that express their appreciation for this, to better understand Slovakia, to better understand their identity or part of their identity, or to better connect with their parents, their grandparents, or their ancestry. So before I give it back to Gabby, the links are in the chat right now.
So do we have probably space for one last question, if there's any, before we wrap up?
If I can interrupt, there's a question about a superstition. So many of the, first of all, why were there so many superstitions that were part of Slovak culture and Slovak folklore? What are the origins of the superstitions? And secondly, the one that's coming up is to not look out the window on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, that was the one. And it was that one was linked to also keeping to yourself and not poking your nose into other people's business, because it's bad luck. And you might see things that you would regret seeing. So it's better to just focus on your life and your own home instead of having a wandering eye. So that could be sort of interpreted as a way, we find now in mindfulness practices, so focusing on yourself, taking time to be silent and still, to look at what's brewing inside you, so you can be prepared for the new year, so that you can offload all that burdens you and that you no longer want to have in your life at this time. Superstitions, there are so many, and they were preserved in a relatively intact in terms of the Christmas and Advent traditions, is because that winter solstice was one of the main holidays of the pagan Slavs. And that was impossible to wipe with the arrival of Christianity. And in fact, especially in rural areas of Slovakia, people maintained those superstitions, those beliefs. They believed in the Christian God and they went to church, but at home, in their private lives, they continued these kind of rituals and ceremonies of their ancestors. And because those around winter were so crucial to them, they were absolutely critical, because they were, you'll see, filled with magic that was to do with love, and who wouldn't want love in their lives. they were filled with magic for prosperity and agriculture. Again, the lives of these people depended on the quality of a harvest. And just as today, back then, we don't really have control over nature. We might think we do, but we don't. All that it takes is a couple of bad summers, and the society disintegrates. There is nothing to eat. And people did experience that in the Middle Ages. So that's why they put so much effort into those traditions. And that's why that superstition surrounding those themes has such a deep roots in the region. And the third component was the magic of protection. Again, this is it is the dark time of the year. We are faced with many challenges as individuals, as societies, as families. And in the past, people explained it by the darkness. It's dark, so it's more, the space is more open for witches, ghosts, and evil spirits to come into our life and cause havoc in it. So we have to protect ourselves. And that was maintained, you know, like that stayed in Slovakia alive and well, and actually practiced as not as a folklore, but as a real thing until the arrival of communism and systematic industrialization and modernization of Slovakia that happened in the 50s and 60s of the last century. So until then, people practiced all this. So that's why until today, this time of the year is still so rich with customs and traditions and superstitions. And one thing I forgot to mention, Advent and Christmas was the time to look into future and to forecast future, and not just to do with love and love life in the next 12 months, but also to do with weather. So on these certain days that are called the witching days, people would watch what the weather was like, and there we find a lot of proverbs in the Slovak language related to that. So for instance, we say Katarina na lade a Vianoce na blate. So if it's snowing and on St. Catherine's Day, then it will be raining on Christmas. And today we live very urban lifestyles. But back then, people really needed to watch the weather to be able to at least partially foretell what's coming in the future and prepare themselves for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw just pop out, there was a question about pyrohy on Christmas. Yes, various kinds of pastas and noodles were also a popular dish served on the 24th, whether this was sliže, thick noodles, or halušky in some areas, or pyrohy, whether sweet or savory.
And just to add to that commentary about many of these customs, rites, and rituals, they have been continuously maintained across generation, mother to daughter, father to son. So people continue the habits, but they've lost contact with the higher schemata reason as to why they were doing them. And that's because there was that great conversion between one belief system, which was the native faith of the Slavs, which was paganism, towards Christianity. So from a perspective where there were multiple gods, to all of a sudden interpretation of the divine through only one God. And that the Christianization was quite harsh in the Slavic lands. There were very serious consequences if the people wanted to maintain contact with their native faith, wanted to revere the gods. So the way they were able to do that was in a way to wipe their minds of the knowledge of Velish and Svarog and Perun and Živa and Lada, and instead just focus their divine mind on the narrative of Jesus being God's son and Mary birthing Jesus, etc. But nevertheless, the rituals that were practiced in the homes were maintained. They continue to be passed on, and that's how we can see this beautiful merging of the two worlds together still in 2020 Slovakia today.
And in fact, the witching days, you know, they're always on a feast day of a saint, St. Catherine, St. Andrew, St. Barbara, St. Lucia, and St. Thomas on the 21st of December as the last one. they're kind of, when Christianity came, these people knew they couldn't just dismiss what had been there before for so long. So as in other parts of the world, a lot of these components of the original pre-Christian culture were absorbed into Christianity and different name, different meaning, slightly different purpose. And so we do find that these saints, Santa Lucia, Santa Barbara, Saint Nicholas, etc., they are tied into the pre-Christian pagan deities. But they are called something else, it's presented as Christian, but at the core of it, you can tell it's pagan.
Like the cleaning of, as in today, St. Lucy's Day, which is the cleaning of, energetic cleaning of the house with the goose feather, with the white feathers, and wearing the white capes. I mean, that clearly does not come from Christianity. It has nothing to do with the church. Nevertheless, it's been integrated, it's been reclaimed, it's been called Saint Lucy, which was a martyr saint. But the actual ritual of it, if you look at it, is completely different and not connected to Christianity. It's actually, pagan practice, energetic.
Right. Yeah. So this was also a way to convert people, to persuade them, to give them a point of familiarity, because you can't just skip and jump into something that's completely different. There had to be that bridge, and those traditions of folklore and the customs, they were the bridge. So they allowed people to continue practicing their ceremonies, but now it was within that Christian space. And as such, it was kind of maintained until today.
So there was a basic rebranding. Sorry, Gabrielle and I could just endlessly ping pong back and forth about this. And this is something actually we explore in The Legend of the Linden. We definitely look at the arrival of Christianity, why it came, how Slovakia became a gateway for Christianity into the Slavic world, but also this Old Slavonic, so the Slavic written language. And we also explore the pagan roots of Slovakia and contemporary 20th century and 21st century history. So I've provided the links there. If you do want to look at it, it's a beautiful Christmas gift for yourself or for your loved ones or for family members that were maybe born to Slovakia and have been long time disconnected from the land. Maybe this book would bring them some joy and beautiful memories of the motherland. Any last questions?
I would just add one little pikoška, as we say in Slovak, this little pearl. I'm sure you know about the whipping that takes place on Easter Monday. So there was also whipping happening on St. Stephen's Day, so 26th of December or Boxing Day. But instead of using willow whips, boys used whips from the silver birch to whip girls into beauty and health and prosperity with. So that's something that is very little known. It's no longer practiced, but it's interesting that this ritual, we find it in it repeats itself within that Slovak yearly cycle.
Well, great. Thanks for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that. I know when I post when we on our social media when we post about the Easter traditions and the water and the whips. I mean, that always attracts a lot of interest. So, but I wasn't aware of a Christmas equivalent to that. So thanks for sharing that. So yeah. So Gabby and Zana, thanks for giving a great presentation today. I learned quite a few new things about Slovak and Christmas Czech traditions, and I'm sure the others who are here today did the same. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us to present this. And so here, us at the SASW, we want to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday season, and we hope to see you in the future, and hopefully in person once COVID goes away. So take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you for having us. And we also wish you a beautiful rest of the Advent and a very Merry Christmas. and Happy New Year.
Happy third Advent Sunday.